Welcome to everyone who is filtering into our Zoom room. Just give it about a few more seconds here and we will get started. All right, here we are, right about 4 o'clock. Welcome to our Thursday webinar. I'm Liz Perry. I will be your moderator today. If this is your first time joining us, we are Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. We're a not-for-profit research and education center here near Mesa Verde National Park in beautiful Southwest Colorado. This is our campus behind me. You can find out more about us on our website at crowcanyon.org or send us an email, give us a call, reach out. We are also streaming live on Facebook again. Thank you, Ben. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can put questions in the Q&A tab at any time during the presentation. And as always, this will be up on our YouTube channel. There's so many amazing presentations on our YouTube channel from back webinars. So if you are not a subscriber, please sign up. We'd like to begin with some acknowledgements. Crow Canyon acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. With the work we're doing at Crow Canyon, we seek to bring light into the darkness of memory that these lands, waters, wildlife, and her descendants hold as the result of policies of removal, genocide, and displacement. We seek paths that support and align with Indigenous people and communities, and with gratitude we honor the contributions of present-day Indigenous communities, descendants, and the colleagues with whom we partner who guide our work and our mission every day. Thank you. Another thank you and a remembrance to our dear friend and colleague, Taylor Hasbrook, who invented this webinar series during the pandemic and is no longer with us. Taylor, we are grateful for you and we miss you too. This is an entirely free webinar series made possible through your donation. So thank you to everyone who donates all the time when you register for webinars. It really makes a difference. And speaking of donations, we have started Colorado Gives Day season. If you are joining us from Colorado, we are, as is relevant to the topic of our webinar today, we are raising money to support schools, school scholarships to come to Crow Canyon, to participate in our programming. Got into some cute pictures of some of our students here, but it's more than cute. Schools, particularly underserved schools in our communities, are really suffering from funding right now, which is what has driven us to focus our fundraising at the year end for schools and students. I have more stories than I could tell you now about how great the need is right now for students and teachers and schools, and please consider helping out so that we can keep supporting them and bringing them to Crow Canyon programs. We also have next year's cultural exploration seminars are on the website. Check them out. Some amazing trips for next year here locally, also with our friends and partners at Jicarilla Apache in Indigenous California communities, and then a celebration of the Antiquities Act will be 100 years, or anyway, 2026, 1906. So really excited about these programs for next year. So check them out. Last webinar next week, Harmonizing Tradition, Navajo Music, and the Beauty Way in Archaeology. So please join us again next week. So I'm really excited to introduce our speakers today and such an incredibly relevant topic. We are very honored to have Ben Calabaza, the Director of Communications at the Native American Community Academy Inspired Schools Network. He is from Kwiyagat Pueblo. He leads communication strategies at NISN that uplift and enhance visibility for community-led schools in 7 states. With 20 years of experience in marketing, branding, and storytelling, he has worked with local and national nonprofit organizations, museums, and cultural institutions. He also serves on the boards of the Chamisa Foundation and the Mesa Verde Foundation. And joining Ben will also be Nena Lopez, who I can see her community from here, who is a teacher at the Kwiyagat Community Academy. She's from the Ute Band of Northern Ute Tribe out of Fort Duchesne, Utah, and the Weenooch Band of the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe out of Towaoc. She says that her passion is teaching the children here in my homeland with the support of my family and community. She teaches kindergarten at the Kwiyagat Community Academy and has been instrumental in the development and refinement of their school's graduate profile and 5th grade graduate capstone. Her work at the Academy has resulted in valuable contributions to ensuring students within her community experience quality education as promised by the school's mission that was dreamed by the members of her community. Ben and Nena, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Yep. Thank you for inviting us.
I'll start. Amera hopa kaneteme eseta maeshutuna hanasita kiwamesita. My name, as my intro, is Ben Calabaza. I come from Kiwa Pueblo, also known as San Domingo Pueblo here in New Mexico. And we're really excited to share who we are as a network and featuring Nena, who's a part of, as an introduction, Kwiyagat Community. So we're going to start out with sharing a general video of NISN, who we are, what we're doing. So if that can be prepped, and then I'll come back after the video and share a little bit more.
NACA was started out of probably decades-long conversations about how do we build an education system that's adequate for Native American students.
That inherently meant that we had to challenge the existing practices of public schools. So whereas a regular public school is you're likely to find English language arts, for us it was Native literature. The same thing with science versus Indigenous science, or Native languages, Indigenous languages.
Language was really important to me, and I didn't grow up on the reservation. My dad's Navajo, my mom isn't. My dad doesn't know Navajo, he didn't speak it growing up. So that was something that I never really got to learn. NACA gave me the opportunity to learn more about my culture, to learn my language.
NACA likes to focus on a lot of different aspects within the classroom. So a lot of that is like peer relationships, student-teacher relationships, just being able to foster that sort of growth and community.
It's a place where you can feel comfortable, and you can feel relaxed, and you can feel at home.
After NACA was created, we got a lot of visitors. A lot of the visitors were coming because of the word of mouth around what we were doing. Be like, we want to do the whole thing. We want to start a school in our community. And the idea was that we wanted to stand alongside schools and communities in articulating what education means for them. And the way we make decisions had to be an essence of and connected to the community.
Everything for NISN begins with community-led design.
I think NISN does a great job of reconnecting us back to the genius that exists in our community.
When we're designing curriculum, we use a model called Indigenous Genius by Design that begins with community input sessions.
Community leads, and they tell us what big ideas, what values need to guide what students are learning.
We ask the family members and the students, what is it that you want to see supplement the curriculum that's already happening, that's set in place at your school?
A lot of these schools integrate culture, integrate Indigenous language, and they think about, going beyond traditional assessments. They think about project-based learning. I think that's one of the things I think about with NISN and NACA too, is like, we're vulnerable. I share my curriculum, I'll share my school design plan, and please, tear it up. Let me know where I can improve, and let me know where I am saying one thing but doing another, and then being able to take that feedback and take it back and tweak it for the sake of our children and our schools.
Since 2015, NISN has grown a lot. Started with a handful of fellows that were only operating in New Mexico. Now, 2023, there are 13 schools in different states.
But we've never been a cookie cutter, standardized kind of let's push out these schools. So what one community wants and needs isn't going to necessarily be what another community wants and needs.
We have a dual language school, we have a STEAM school, we have a college preparation school, and all of them have the same 4 big ideas.
And those are holistic wellness, academic relevance, identity development, and that notion of community-led.
Every single school in the network has an articulation in their mission to that end.
Land-based healing and learning is a huge part of this work too, right? I always think about Ute, and he says you can't have Indigenous education without the land, and that's so true. What's the opportunity to connect with land and each other? And so I think that's a central part of remembrance, right? And so building meaningful learning activities and reflection as well.
Land-based learning looks different in different schools. Naka happens to be in the last standing building of the Albuquerque Indian School. There's a big history. There's also an opportunity around redefining spaces and places. At a school like Deep, up in Navajo, New Mexico, they're right next to one of their sacred mountains. And so it's common that students will center their instruction right there in the mountain. For a community in northern Minnesota, the Red Lake Nation, they have a rich history with water. So their land-based learning is a lot about water, being in relationship with water. And so all of that, from the desert to the urban setting to the lakes of Minnesota, it's all land-based learning. And it looks different for a community. It has to.
When I think of NACA and NISN, I think of Indigenous joy.
We design places and spaces to allow people to come as they are. And it's our job to really build them up.
My biggest takeaway from NACA was just finding out who I was as a person. That knowledge, every single day being offered to me, was a privilege.
You know, we're creating community that is for time immemorial.
I really do hope that this gets a lot bigger so that we're able to reach more people and more communities and just kind of emphasize the importance of education and having it indigenized.
We have to be intentional because we're setting the path for the next at least 3-4 generations of our families. What will my grandkids experience as a result of what we're doing is front and center for us.
Awesome. I hope you all enjoyed the video. What I wanted to do is provide an update, right? Since that video was created in 2023, our network has grown. So 18 schools in 7 states, which is really exciting. And I wanted to share as well a little more detail in terms of what you might be wondering in terms of what are these schools, where are they located? So the new schools that we've added are a part of, which essentially all these schools were created through our School Design Fellowship, which is a 3-year fellowship that brings in community leaders. And if you didn't pick up, we are a community-led organization. So when a community is wanting to build out a school, it's very important that they create the buy-in from the community before that school gets created. Because the majority of those students that will attend that school will come from those communities. So the list that you're looking at is a compilation of all of our network schools, and it includes one partner school, which is located in South Dakota, Enemy Swim Days School. Besides that school, there is still some connection to how we're all connected, but the other network schools revolve around the 4 big ideas, right? Being community-led, focusing on academic relevance, holistic wellness, and incorporating identity development. So that's sort of the connection between all of the schools that you see on this map. And we are very proud of being a national organization, right? And hoping that eventually we start to grow this map and you start to see more stars located there. Once schools complete their schools and they're operational, 2 individuals from each of the schools then become a part of a fellowship program, another fellowship program called the Growing Together Fellowship. And this is where we have school leaders, administrators coming together, and we provide services from professional development teacher coaching, implementation of what we call our mission-driven story cycle. So looking at how the mission of these schools align with the data they want to collect, the direction they're going, and making sure that all of that is in alignment so that as they go through the reaccreditation process, that everything is seamless and easier to incorporate. And a big part of what was said in the video was this exploration of land-based healing and learning. How do we create spaces where students are then taken out into their environment? How do they learn from these places? Because that's a foundation, I think, in most Indigenous communities where the land is also a teaching space. So that's very important for all of our schools to incorporate some form of land-based learning and that reconnection so that they're not just stuck within the four walls and learning within that structure. So here today we have Nena, who, again, as I mentioned, is from the Kwiyagat Community Academy, and she'll be sharing more about her school, her relationship to NISN, and giving you a little bit more background. And then she'll also share out a graduate profile that's used to help to determine what a student potentially or leaves the school with, and the structure and how that's all been created. So Nena, I'll pass it over to you.
Hello, Mike Nuchu Nunania, Nena Marie Lopez, Nunai Nunia Mipuichich. Hello everyone, my name is Nena Lopez. My Ute name is Little Bird. I come to you from the Northern Ute tribe of the Uena Band, and I come from Towaoc, Colorado of the Weemanuch Band, where I reside and live. Kwiyagat Community Academy is located in Towaoc, Colorado. Kwiyagat means bear in our language, which is very significant to the Ute culture. The bear is our brother, so definitely, around this time of year, right now, I shared with everybody earlier that our kids had taken a field trip up to Boggy Draw today, and in their learning process, learning from the land, seeing what's outside, understanding that one thing they took with them today is that the bear is going into hibernation now. So that was one thing that happened awesome today. About Kwiyagat Community Academy, it was not the first school on the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. The first school in Towaoc was a boarding school in 1960, but is no longer open. There is still history buildings in our community. I'm a former descendant of a boarding school survivor, which is my grandfather, Norman Lopez. The Towaoc community also has a Head Start program, which opened in 1960, and it serves from 3-year-old to 5-year-olds and is still open today. Kwiyagat Community Academy opened in 2014. One thing I'm going to start with is how the school came about. It was hard going to school in the school district as a Native American. There were calls to our community. There was calls to homes that our kids were being suspended and expelled for unfair reasons. In 2014, there were reports by the U.S. Department of Education of Civil Rights that Native American students were disciplined more harsh than white students. The kids came forward with their parents in our community to raise awareness with their voice. And as my community had gotten together and we started talking a lot more, see this happen in 2014. I graduated in 2013. Miss Tina King Washington, she was my teacher. She actually taught in the school district while I was going to school. She started from the middle school and she also moved into the high school as I was going into the high school. And she was a great mentor. She helped majority of us keep our heads on straight. She got after us when it was necessary. And she just brought light to so much. And so when we started these talking circles in Towaoc and, you know, talking with each other, she took these discussions with her to the tribal council and she had talked to the tribal lawyer. She said, what can we do? And sorry about that. She said, what can we do? And they replied, start your own school. The lawyers did state that they would help her the best way they can, which was so amazing. There are about, when I was in school, there was about 500 kids and we had to travel 20 miles on a bus ride every day to public school. We would have to be on the bus around 7 a.m. We would have to get up around 6 o'clock a.m. to be ready to get on the bus at 7. We wouldn't get home. We would leave the school around 4:30. We wouldn't get home until like maybe 4, maybe 5 o'clock in the evening time. So that was a big, you know, bus ride. To where today, like when the kids do go to Kwiyagat Community Academy, it's only a 5-minute ride, literally 2 miles, not even sometimes 1 mile away from the school. So, you know, one thing that we do share is that the kids love coming into school and being with us and sorry, excuse me. In the process of this schooling, Tina had started the school and she started these conversations. There was about, they had a founders, and the founders were Alicia Whitehead, Sherelle Lang, and Richard Fulton. Kwiyagat, within that time of 2014 and all these talking circles and everything, we have reached out to NISN. They were a big part of the upcoming of KCA. KCA is what we use for short. In 2001 was when the school opened. It was the first charter school on an Indian reservation in the state of Colorado. And it is operated and maintained by the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. It was authorized by the Colorado Charter School Institute. In the first year of school, we had 27 students, which we started out with K and first grade, which was in 2001. And then our goal was by 2005 to have 100 students. And it's 2005 and we are at 79 students today. KCA provides so much within the community. So we like to think of ourselves in our community as also a network where the Head Start teaches the language from 3 years old to 5 years old. KCA provides language from 6 years old to 12 years old. And we have a program here in Towaoc, and it's called the Towaoc program, and they teach kids from 12 and up the language. The school as itself, as we were growing throughout the years, we had a culture teacher and her name was Miss Betty Howell. She is no longer with us. We miss her dearly. She was our language teacher for since KCA opened, and she taught us a lot of the language. She taught us to, you know, she wanted us to learn and carry on the education of land-based learning, and that was her big thing. Like one of her main things throughout the school year was every year we had to definitely always cleanse and, cedar ourselves off was one. Um, always stretching during the springtime, and always teaching the kids about things like being in the mountains and putting pennies under the cedar trees, or washing their hairs as the boys and girls go into the mountains. We wash our hair with yucca fruit. But they had started a program within Fort Lewis College, and it was called the Ute Language Teachers Program, and you had earned a certificate in it. And she was very big on us getting to learn new things, and we have obtained those certificates, and we incorporate those in our classroom today with a lot of games and fun activities. We are in the process right now, so we added a school year we added a new grade on every year since 2000. And so the first year was K through 1, the next year K through 2, K through 3, K through 4, all the way up into 5th grade. And we're at our 5th grade level, and which brings us to like are working with NISN, and have been a part of the fellowship since 2000, and I just written it down because I actually had to think about it, since 2003 now. And super excited to share with you guys, like Ben said, with the support of NISN and just understanding like the community and the children and the teachers, like, taking a whole of our story and how we're gonna, incorporate that all together. So today I'm gonna show you guys my grad profile, and this grad profile comes from the school. It does not just come from me, it comes from my community, it comes from the kids, it comes from a variety of different aspects, and we just love what we did with it. If you want to go ahead and present that, Ben. So this is KCA. I keep saying because I always talk to my dad and them about it. But this is the grad profile for the KCA Community Academy. And like Ben said, as you read the bullet points and different things, like, for one is our mountain, and there's a very rich story that goes behind that mountain and that man that sleeps there. He's our protector. He's the man who watches over us as we lived here on this beautiful land. I mean, and the bears, and they represent community. And it's came a long way. Our grad profile came a long way. And I remember the kids, we only had one bear at the time when we first showed the children, and they were like, well, where's the little bears? The mama bear has to have the little bears. And I was like, okay, well, we can work with that. We're gonna definitely take in your aspect and put it in there as well. So this is our grad profile. You see it has community, land-based, wellness, Ute culture, and academics. So as Ben mentioned, we're gonna be we worked on a 5th grade capstone, and we are in our first year of doing our capstone, and this was a big part of it. And definitely, as far as we came now, the things we're working towards is building a new school, and we have a layout right now of a model school, and it was a team effort from the federally, state, tribal agencies. Today we've raised about 3 million for that school. In our school, we definitely want a culture room. We would like a library, an art room, a computer lab, a gym, a lot of plants, land-based learning, and definitely, you know, the language. The language is a big thing to where we want definitely our elders to come in and participate with the kids. Right now, we're in a very good part of our school where we had wrote in our own books and created our own curriculum. And also, like I said, the 5th grade capstone, it's been quite an adventure, you know, doing these things and growing with this community, you know, and I thank you all for coming, and you know, I hope you guys have a good time. So thank you.
Thank you, Nena. Ben, did you have some more to add after Nena's presentation?
Yeah, I mean, if you had any questions, I know there might be some in the chat. I think we're happy to answer any. If there are any, the last slide we have, of course, is just to stay in touch for NISN, for those who maybe want to sign up for our newsletter, to just be aware of what's happening within our network. You can go to our website, NACA-inspiredschools-network.org. I know it's a long URL, /newsletter, and that's where you can input your phone number, email, and then we'll add you to our subscriber list. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. If anybody has any in the chat, Nina, I'm pretty sure would be happy to join in on the conversation as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I have some questions, and folks, for the viewers, please go ahead and put in questions in the Q&A or the chat. I'll look for them in both places. But my mind was bursting on that last slide, and I was wondering if I could ask maybe Ben and or Nena to elaborate on it a little bit. What a wonderful visual, you know, describing. I took a picture of it while you were talking, so I could think about it. And it when Nena was explaining it, sort of the components of the graduate profile, I had jotted down some notes when you were talking too, Ben, about what it seemed like were some of the NISN pillars you talked about: academic relevance, holistic wellness, identity development. That seemed to kind of tie into what Nena put on that last slide. What a wonderful way to explain it. And as I was looking at it, I was thinking, are these, it sort of seems like these are desired outcomes for the graduates, but also your philosophy, right? What's driving the whole creation of the schools? Maybe just talk about that a little bit more. What is it that you're conveying there?
Sure. Yeah, so the capstone projects are pretty much a way in which a school can measure, right, the growth of a student at the end of either their 5th grade year, 8th grade year, or 12th grade year. And so Nena and KCA was a part of the Graduate Growing Together Fellowship. So this is working with those established schools that are currently you know, operating. And so it was trying to find ways in which they can measure their successes as students, right, as a school. And so rather than creating a table, a metrics, right, one of the things that our mission-driven story cycle team works with our Growing Together fellows is creating visuals and, I guess, ways of knowing and thinking and teaching that are reflected in a way that may not come across as your typical, here's our metric, you know, this is how we're measuring our growth for our students. And so the ability to be able to create something that is more artistic in the way that KCA developed its connection to this idea of a capstone, right? How that is connected to culture is very important. So NISN is more of a facilitator in the conversation of making that metrics, whatever that is for the school, make sense so that when it's presented to community, then it's
Right.
easily absorbed than to say, here's graphs and charts and here's, percentages, and in simple language, right? You were able to kind of follow the story that Nena shared with the land-based importance of the sleeping Ute, right? In the background, the bears, and what that is a part of in terms of the culture, and then assigning those things, right? Like academics, is you saw it was tied to the head of the front bear, language, culture, all those things were all connected. And so I hope I'm answering the question, but each school is unique, right? So you're not going to see a replication because each community is unique, right? Similar to the tribes that they represent in the communities that they come from. So it's going to look different for each community, and that's what's really cool about seeing these graduate profiles come together. But they all come together, they share. Maybe Nena, you can talk about others you've seen besides your own, and I know we had a convening a couple weeks ago, so maybe you can share what that was like seeing others.
Yeah, like Ben said, the graduate profile and the capstone, I actually got to sorry, let me turn on my camera here. Uh-oh. Okay. I got to visit Raíces last year, and I was so impressed. It was so amazing because theirs had to do with a lot of language, a lot of connection with their community, and just capturing that. And we call that street data. So like one thing is like when they present and they're speaking with confidence about something they really desire, something they really love, something they're really passionate about, is a cool thing. That's why I'm like super excited, to see where these like he said, the communities, the different schools are not all the same. We're not all doing the same thing. We didn't choose the same things. It was all tied to our community and how it was going to be presented, and how it's going to go. And our capstone, which ours is being a good relative. So really, I wanted to put it in the hands of me and my team wanted to put it in the hands of the children, and wanted them to be passionate about what they choose and how they want to tell their story, whether it would be online showing like a slide, or if it was a Lego model, if that was the way they expressed themselves, if they wanted to do a podcast, if they wanted to do a radio thing, if they wanted to do a newspaper feed, like that's where I was going with this. And just the support that NSIN gave us, like it feels so amazing that we are letting the children and the community tell their stories, because there's mentors that are involved in this. They have leaders, they have people coming in to help them with language and what they're representing. It's really amazing. And when I visited Raíces and seeing their mentor there, cheering them on, and them feeling very, empowered in what they're doing and loving like every aspect of it. It was so amazing. It's like, how do we capture this? It's so amazing that we're capturing it in our own ways, in our own communities, and just to measure that, as the children tell their stories. So
oh, it's amazing. And that concept that you've all talked about of the way that you measure success or outcomes, right, for these programs also has to be about community relevance. It has to be, it's, I mean, I think everyone feels that standard academic, measurements really fall short, right, and leave a lot of people behind. And that was it's just really impressive.
Yeah, so I will add too that we're talking about capstones, and some folks might be wondering, what is that? It's basically like an end of year project. Could be a research project. So for our flagship school, right, the Native American Community Academy in Albuquerque, the seniors basically produce a presentation for community, and it's something that they're passionate about. There is sort of a question in the Q&A about how are we preparing students to be able to make a living, right? So that first connection to that question might be, well, where's their passion? What do they want to do? How do they want to contribute back to community, right? I did sit in on one of those presentations, and it was about mental wellness. So the student was starting to explore her contribution to that field, right? So if you want to think about that as how are we preparing a student for living, I think that's where that first initiation is, of finding a passion for where they're going to take their education after they leave a school.
Right.
And of course, it might be different for, say, a fifth grader who might be just showing demonstrative abilities, from language, mastery, if you will, to giving back through a community project, right? And so the point of these capstones is meant to incorporate all of this knowledge, not just the sort of Western way of, can you add and subtract? Can you recite these terms, right? I think that's essential, of course, but a big part of it is, how do you have the student reconnect with community, right? And then also serve as a role model for those younger ones that are following. So I think Nena and KCA's, graduate profile is kind of, an essential visual that folks might need to see, that when you talk about a student's success, it's not just about them succeeding, it's about the community succeeding, right?
Oh, that's huge. Yeah. Wow. I have to write that down. But that's such a wonderful concept. You mentioned when you were first talking about the graduate profile, something called a mission-driven story cycle. Can you tell us more about what that is?
Yeah, a lot of this is connected to how we reconnect, right? How are we as an organization thinking about education? I know this could be yet another webinar, right? The history of Indigenous education, or Native American education in the United States, has its own history, right? And where we're picking up, right, as a network, is not to sort of settle ourselves in the history of what has been done to us in terms of education, but how do we transform that idea of, we have the autonomy now, the sovereignty, and the know-how. We've always had it. How do we reshape what works for us within our communities when it comes to education, right? There was a question about science. Well, NISN is working in partnership with the Lano Foundation to develop an Indigenous science curriculum, right? So how do you look at science through the lens of an Indigenous perspective? What ways of knowing exist still within communities, so that when you talk about the cycle of water, right, that you're learning it from the view of a community perspective that embeds language, that embeds culture, right? Not just knowing the types of clouds and how the cycle actually functions, but there might be aspects of culture and ceremony tied to those. So again, it's how do you holistically prepare the students so that, again, it reflects this new form of education, right? And I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do for our network. And going back to the mission-driven story cycle, that team itself works on aligning a school's functions, right? Because as we know, we evolve around seasons. Where at least in this hemisphere, we're working our way towards fall and winter. So for a school, what does that look like during this season, right? So it's sort of like reestablishing what happens during these seasonal changes for a school. So again, it's a new way, but an old way of thinking, right? As a farmer might prepare for fall for the next season, how might a school prepare itself similarly, right? So when they're on summer break, what's happening in the background while students are not in school? What's happening on the back end? So I think creatively having that tied to mission and making sure that alignment is there, that's sort of the term, right, that we use, mission-driven story cycle, because it's all tied to the school's mission and making sure they're constantly going back to that, right? I think oftentimes organizations, not just schools, potentially forget their missions, right? And maybe go off track a bit. So this whole cycle and this system, if you will, allows the school to remember what its focus is, right? Remember that community input is important, student input is important, and making sure that they're aware of like the process in a way that's maybe more cyclical than it is linear. I hope that makes
Beautiful.
sense.
It totally makes sense. And you're so right? All organizations, education, us, struggle with, wait, take a minute, right? And get grounded and remember why we're doing all this. Nena, does that resonate with you too?
Yeah, definitely. It brings me back to the summer. We did this thing with all the kids who came to our summer camp, and we were talking about papas, which is potatoes in our language. And my people, they love potatoes. We've loved potatoes for many generations. And so we did a field trip up towards Lizard Head this past summer. And I told the kids, I said, nowadays we walk into a store, we can get a bag of potatoes really easy. And we had taken a hike up there. And I told them, I said, on this hike, we're gonna look for wild potatoes like our ancestors did before us. And climate's pretty high. The kids got pretty tired. And I was like, do you guys see how much it took for, our ancestors to come up here and, harvest their potatoes? There was a lot of work put into it other than going to the store and just buying a bag. I said there was processes to it. The learning that I put into it was the fact that, starch is pretty bad. And so I was telling them, like, if we put in the work like our ancestors did, then maybe, we wouldn't have it all the time. The resource wouldn't be there, and we would only be able to obtain this in a certain time of year. So that was a little land-based learning we did over the summer, which was really cool. So
Oh yeah, what a wonderful lesson. So kind of on that topic of community, Ben, when you were talking about the schools being formed, you talked about how, it has to be a community-led organization. You have to get buy-in from the communities. What does that process look like of startup, and how do you get the buy-in and talk to the stakeholders and make the decisions?
Yeah, so it all starts with an application process, right? So internally, there is a cycle we have when that process starts to open up. So we currently have 4 that are in the community, the school design fellowship right now. And so they're working on looking at what the school's going to be. Is it going to be a public charter? Is it going to be a private school? Who's going to start accrediting them? Preparing all those documents, looking at facilities, looking at operations, right? So all of that goes into building a school is what's discussed during this 3-year fellowship. And to get into that fellowship, basically, we look at it through this idea of, has this conversation started within community, right? To kind of answer a little, there was a question in the Q&A too, of the difference between NACA and NISN, right? NACA is within the NISN name. But when that school was created about 10 years after, right, communities started to realize how impactful this was for students. And NACA is located within Albuquerque, so an urban setting, right? Where there's a high population of urban folks that come from off reservation, so the population of natives that exists in Albuquerque is pretty large, and so what kind of other options exist for those students other than maybe the Albuquerque public school system, right? And so this gave them an opportunity to send students to a school that allowed them to learn their language, right? And then start to incorporate identity development, start to give them a foundation of who they are so that they could have more success, right? So they're not questioning those things of themselves. And I think the success of those students leaving, when you have a foundation of identity, you're having less of that question when you're at, say, a 4-year college, right? When you're not in a comfortable environment that you're familiar with. So after those 10 years, the need for this came from different communities, right? So for example, Nena's community realized, we need to start our own school here. That's when NISN essentially was created, right? It was a response to the need and the request from tribal communities. So when you look at the map, or we're able to see the map, all these communities and all these schools are not equally, located to high population or high density, metropolitan areas, if you will. Some are going to be rural, right? Our schools in South Dakota, right? So that whole structure has to be evaluated. And so going to your question about how does the community get selected, well, it has to be formulated and the need of the community. I can't just say, hey, I'm starting this school and start the school, right? And as I mentioned, I'm pretty sure when the conversation happened with KCA, it had to be an alternative to maybe a simple solution is like, we don't want our students to be transported 20 miles away, right? Just to go to school. And so if that's an agreement within the community, there might be support from tribal councils, right? Because then again, there has to be a foundation of finances, right? Some communities might be granted property to build a school. So again, it's building those connections. So the conversation is not singular, right? It's then getting that support, because then ultimately what happens is these schools then have to recruit, right, from that community. So that trust of having a parent send their student to these schools is key. And that's why being community led and having that input come from parents is really essential. I know that at KCA, they've had, as you mentioned, talking circles, right, to share out that grad profile. Is this really being vetted by the community so that when they send their students there, the parents and the community knows, oh yeah, they're incorporating culture, they're incorporating academics, they're, so I think that's a big component of what we do as a network, is making sure that folks that do want to come in, we kind of want to vet and make sure a community is ready for it and it's not just a singular idea.
Nena, was that your experience with the start of KCA?
Yes, definitely. I think that was a big thing. I'm a teacher, but also I'm a parent. So when the school had opened, I have my son's in 5th grade now, so he's been there since KCA's been open. And that was a big part, that like him knowing who he is as a youth boy, his upbringing. I was like, one big jump for me was, the language. And there's still things that I am learning from him that also he learned from me, and just sharing that in the community is a big thing, as well as those connections from home to school. And yeah, definitely that's exactly how it was.
Yes.
There's a question about how we work and train educators. I think a big part of that is we're working on this. There's several, I guess, entryways into this, right? We focus definitely on supporting the network educators first, and some of those other access points for those that may not be within the network would be through the curriculums that we are able to provide. We have a Native literature curriculum that is meant to supplement or replace traditional ELA, right, curriculum, especially when you have a community like, say, KCA, where we want to then incorporate more authors that look like them, right, are telling stories that are familiar to them, because then again, that connection to reading and literature is greater if the storytelling is aligned with things they recognize, right? And so that's one access point, right? That curriculum is open access to any teacher, educator from our NISN resource hub. We're working on, like I mentioned, the Indigenous science curriculum. It's being piloted this year into next school year. And once that's all fleshed out, that'll also be accessible to educators. We do have a symposium where you're able to sort of explore what these curriculums look like. This 2026 will be in Albuquerque in July. We haven't yet announced the official event itself, but that's one way in which we do that. We also provide, again, for our network, professional development. We're also working on a new program, a teacher mentor program. So bringing in who are first year teachers, what advice might they need or want to get from experienced teachers, and having sort of that dialogue. So in a sense, building cohorts of information, right, and information sharing. and then the other area in which we're getting into is maybe exploring more of this land-based healing and learning space. So getting folks into how do I incorporate land-based learning? So we do have, again, gatherings that do focus on specifically that itself. So our priority is first with our network schools, but we are starting to explore what that looks like to sort of expand this. And of course, like any expansion requires funding. So hopefully you sign up for our newsletter, because we are working to do our own fundraising as we get to the end of the year.
Absolutely. So, Nena, what are your hopes and dreams for Kwiyagat in 10 years? What would you hope that the school and the community looks like?
Right now, my biggest hope is that it keeps growing. Like, one dream that I do have and I see within the network too is, oh man, it's so neat. I want a high school. I want a middle school. I want to see this community grow and go as far as we can, but also empowering our people within the community to become educators. I mean, even, like storytelling, in our community is one thing is we always look up to our elders and everything they share. There are teachers too. That it starts at home with that knowledge that we share. And so definitely just those are my two biggest. I'm excited. I definitely can't wait to see this grow more and more every year. It's been such an amazing process, and I'm excited to see what the future has in store for us.
Absolutely. Ben, how about NISN? What does success look like in the future for your program?
I think for sure, making sure that all of our schools are, thriving, not in the sense of, of course, the students graduating, moving on, essentially building the next phase, right? Imagine KCA with a high school, so that they stay within the system of like what's been established for them from K through 5. So I think that's important, and then making sure that our network is financially stable, right? A lot of growth that's going to come from this is being able to support growth, and Nena shared, they're raising money for a campus. Oftentimes these schools are built with existing structures, but definitely are maybe modified to fit within what is required to host students. And so that's the beauty of having all of that in-house, right? We have a facilities and operations team who are aware of the standards, are aware of looking at buildings, inspecting buildings, making sure they're retrofitted to be a classroom, or making changes. So again, I think all of those things is to make sure we're stable as an organization, right? So that we can continue the growth. And eventually, like I mentioned, that map, we want to see more of those states start to populate, or more stars start to be added. But I think examples like Nena's school are what we use to talk about this when it comes to a community wanting and is curious about changing its structure of education, for their kids and their students.
Do you do some outreach? You were saying, communities need to apply and reach out, but are you out talking to people and encouraging them to apply as well?
Yeah, we have our leadership development team who definitely goes out, and when we had our last open call for submissions for the fellowship, it gets tough, right? If we only have 2 spots to be able to be open for the next 3 years in our second cohort, that's where I'm glad I'm not on that review team, but I do know that it can become competitive. But who's ready, right? Who has that internal investment, maybe from the community? Is for example, if it's on reservation land, does the tribal council support the idea? So it's really just measuring the readiness, right? Because we want to hit the ground running and giving them all the resource we can to make sure that they open.
I think, did you have something to say? Nena, you're on mute.
Yeah, one thing I want to say too, we actually had a convene a month ago, and we convened in Albuquerque. And one thing I did see within their schools, is alumni teaching.
Wonderful.
So
Yeah.
yes, definitely that's one thing I
Yeah.
hope in the future as well.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the goal, right? When you've had an impact from a student who went through this new way of learning and wants to contribute back. And I think, they have several at NACA, have several student alumni who've come back and also are taking sort of leadership roles too. So I think that's the dream, right? And I think we hope that happens for a lot of the networks, all the 18 schools that are within the network.
Fantastic. Oh, well, here's to all of those dreams coming true, and both of you and your colleagues making those dreams come true. Congratulations, and thank you so much for sharing your incredible work with us, and we will keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ben and Nena, and thank you all for watching.
Thank
You'll
you.
be getting an email from Ben with any follow-up info. So hope everybody continues to follow your success as well. So thank you so much, Ben and Nena. Have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again soon.